Throughout my career, I've always fudged the definitions of my role. And this year, I took it to the extreme. I led a design partner program to work with users to do everything under the sun in a short amount of time, like all projects are, right? And in this short amount of time, we had to migrate users, the backend they're using, the UI, frameworks. Um, I work on OpenTelemetry as well, and so part of it was also getting feedback for OpenTelemetry, build user relationships, gather more feedback, and still make sure that they liked us at the end of it. I didn't realize this at the time, but it required me to impersonate roles I've never done before or know much about. So this isn't a migration story or a talk focus on tech. This is about the different roles and people involved in a product lifecycle and what I learned from them. I can say that this has made me a better engineer and it helped me grow my career. Maybe if you're at a stage where you don't know what to do next, this can maybe help you. So, who am I? Well, I'm a principal software engineer at Splunk. I came through an acquisition of a startup that was focusing on tracing. I work on OpenTelemetry both as a contributor to the collector and on the governance committee. And in previous lives, I was at Lyft. I used to work on Envoy, and I was at Microsoft in various projects. So going back to the design partner program I was mentioning about is that I had to gather data for various organizations, right? And people who are working in sales, PMs, VPs, engineers, marketing, support. And I had to learn what they actually needed. And so what are these roles? What were the roles that I needed to adapt or to learn? So the many roles, right? That's Chameleon, right? Blending in, or I also like to say one of the many hats I wore. So one of the many hats I wore was software engineer. Thankfully, this is very natural for me, right? And hopefully natural for a lot of you, so I don't need to describe it too much, but it's about, I view it as delivering a product that fixes a problem, right? We want to tackle big problems. Next one is product management, right? This is painting the picture of where we should go. It's creating a focus amongst all the different, possibilities out there, right? I view this as being really refining what is our target. Support, right? They get a lot of attention, right? They're around for general questions and when things go wrong, and they have to strike a fine balance between acknowledging issues and questions quickly, and getting the actual answers and resolution done quickly. Then there's customer success, right? This is about building momentum, ensuring successful adoption, right? There is a difference between begrudgingly using a product or actually being in love with it and advocating for it and just wanting to interact with it more. And then there's sales engineer, right? This is about getting something working. It's usually working with all these different roles, VPs, engineers, business, and trying to come up with some form of solution that would work for them. So let's take a little tour of all the different roles. Let's start with software engineering. Right? So what are some of the takeaways I took from this project? One is that reference documentation is not user documentation, right? Reference documentation, I view it as explaining what is already in there, versus user documentation is explaining how these features can solve a problem, right? A problem isn't necessarily, how do I turn on a flag, but how do I solve, a larger infrastructure issue or something like that. Another thing is that it's really rewarding, right? I think it's part of why so many of us come to KubeCon is to see what we've built and contributed to is used and valued, right? To see all these logos up on the screen, to know that you were contributing to it, is something really valuable and something that I kind of forgot how much, I love that about the role. One also really fun thing is that it gave me the ability to go into details, especially since I was working with so many different users from different backgrounds, trying to solve different problems, right? Is that every so often there would be a question about, why is specifically for focusing on tracing is like, why would I want to, add instrumentation for my databases? And then after, being able to go into the actual details, of like, one, how to do it, why you can do it, what are ways around it, if you do and don't. This is really fun because, one, who doesn't like having a little bit of debate about different implementations, right? It's a fun whiteboarding session, right? And so yeah, this program gave me the opportunity to do this with all these different inputs and users. So what's next? There. Product management. This role is an art, right? It's about being able to see the forest for the trees. Because usually, right, product management is getting so many requests, there's so many different problems you can solve. And so when there is a clear vision of where we go, it helps everyone else focus. Right? And to be able to actually come up with a clear vision is that it requires so much active listening. It is when getting all these different inputs, right? There's probably be tons of inputs you just don't agree with, and listen to them, and also trying to understand what is the motivation for these people. Where do these problems come from? What are the motivations for what solutions are looking for? It's a very active role. But I think I have two favorite takeaways from my entire experience, and this was one of the first one, is that the question shapes the answer, right? It's kind of like leading the witness. If you're to ask someone, do you think this feature is useful? You're going to get an answer of either yes or no. Chances are you might get a yeah, probably, because either someone's being nice or they can see a way that they could shape a feature to work for them. But that doesn't really give us a lot of answers. It doesn't give us much to go on. And if we're to rephrase that question of what problems do you need to solve that aren't being solved today, that opens it up for, one, just unstructured thinking. You're not framing a solution based, you're not framing a feature based on the existing solution. And then after, there can be so much more dialogue in terms of like why, what, how, who. I can go on about this for hours, and so I just want to reiterate that like the question shapes the answers. Like, think about what question you're asking, and if it is leading to an answer you want, right? We should be going into this trying to get as much data as possible, and then after look for commonalities. Support. Oof. Now, support definitely deserves the metal armor on this because they answer so many questions, and they're also there when things go wrong. And so it's not always fun to get that type of attention. So what are the takeaways? One is that they're in a unique position to see commonality. When you're answering questions from users of all different backgrounds, you're able to see, oh, well, maybe, this one feature needs better documentation, or, whatever configuration we provided, we thought it was intuitive, but there's so many, there's a few things here that we just need to put better safeguards in. One is documentation. If something isn't written, if something's written down, there's no way for other people to know. And as if we're to look at it as a whole product lifecycle, as a team, right, all these different roles, is that we need to write what we know down, because there's going to be someone in support who's going to have to try and answer a question for a user or a customer. And if there's no documentation, it puts them in a really bad spot. Another thing is that, especially since they are gathering, they're gathering questions and seeing so many issues from different ways, is that as a software engineer, is that I should, help create tools that simplify the data collection. Because if you're debugging something, or you're asking for help, and someone's like, okay, grab me configuration, grab me the metrics, grab me the logs, oh, grab me this other little bit example here, and have all these steps that it takes, right? It is going to be really difficult to, one, close this loop really quickly, right? Support is trying to acknowledge an issue and resolve issues as quickly as possible. No asterisks there. And so we should try to make that process better. And of course, documentation. Please, everyone, write more docs. Let's talk about customer success. Right, this is an interesting one because it's something that I think we kind of think that it happens magically, right? If you provide something and it seems useful, people will come. And that's kind of right. But like the first thing is that it's all about, a lot of it is about communication and trust. Is that there needs to be established ways to say what is going on, what is going on, what is going wrong, what's going right, what is to come, and need to build it and build that trust, right? Very similar to how like projects will release vision docs and post issues, right? It's very similar. It's very similar to that. The one thing that is a little painful about this is that it is slow, right? This doesn't happen overnight, and it's something that you just need to write out. It's not something that can be rushed. And to talk about my second favorite takeaway is this: is that success is more than technology. It's about successful adoption, right? Is that we can build the coolest piece of technology that maybe solves everything. But if it is incredibly difficult to use, engineers incorporating into their infrastructure find that it's really brittle to build, or, there's just so many ways to configure that you can't even actually, you just can't figure it out without, 10 people reviewing it. That is technically adoption, but that isn't successful adoption. That is begrudgingly adoption. And so going back to product lifecycle is that, and also to CNCF projects, that we are all building products. We just forget about that. And that we need and the people that we're building products for are usually other engineers. And so when it comes to thinking about successful adoption, we need to think about how do we make our lives better for the engineers who are using it day to day, for the engineers who don't even realize that they're using it, but one day they might get a page that their Kubernetes, pods, their Kubernetes pods are restarting. They never know. They know Kubernetes is a word. They think it's a word. But like, how do you make it easy for even those who don't have to work on it day to day, be able to respond to those pages and move forward? So I really encourage all of you to think about what successful adoption means. And last, sales engineer. What does it mean to be a sales engineer, right? It's what's really interesting about sales engineers, and you don't necessarily have to be selling something to have sales engineer. View it as the person that is the hype, as a promoter in the marketing who is trying to get other people to be like, hey, we're solving your issue. We can help you come up with an MVP, right? So what does that kind of look like? Things to bring back to my role as an engineer, software engineer, I should say, is that minimal viable product is where to start. Now, I'm going to admit these the first two takeaways for sales engineers are so well known, but they're always really hard to apply, right? Is that especially for minimal viable product, right? Is that once we see that there's a problem, we're going to want to solve all of it. We want to, come up with a solution that can get us right from A to Z right away, instead of acknowledging that we're going to have to go from A to B to C. So start small, right? Find something that provides value right away. Because I'll get to the because afterwards. But part of that is from getting anywhere is that perfection is the enemy of good enough. Now, as someone who practices perfection paralysis daily, I logically understand this, but I still don't buy this reasoning. But I'm trying to work through it, right? Is that since, all of this, any form of adoption of a product or project, right, is always an iterative process. So going back to the MVP, you just need to start somewhere. There are going to be bugs. Yes, it is scary. Makes me scared too. But we need to work through them. And the last part is that you need data to make a decision. If you don't have an MVP, if you don't at least try it and see how it works, there's no way, or there's very little way to actually understand if something's going to work for you. And so that's where you need to put on your cowboy hat and just try something new. So, what is my challenge for all of you? Is that I really encourage all of you to try on a new hat, right? I've made a lot of mistakes during this program, and well, that's just a different story. But the thing is that it did teach me a lot, and what was really fun about it is for the first time in a really long time is that I was out of my waters trying to do something new and trying to blend into all these different roles, exactly like this chameleon here. And so see if there's something that you can learn from these other roles. Thank you very much.